Hello, you're listening to The Breakout Room, a podcast created by Know You More, the socially driven professional coaching provider. I'm Tim Mart. If you're interested in hearing from leading coaches and experts on areas such as inclusion, leadership, and well-being, then give us a follow. In this episode, I'm joined by Mandy Murphy, and we're going to be talking about well-being in the workplace, performance. Mandy is a qualified coach practitioner with expertise in work transitions and well-being. Mandy's also an occupational health specialist with over 24 years in delivering, managing, and commercializing occupational health services. Personally, she's also my well-being partner in crime. We've worked together on self-coaching resources around well-being, parental returners making transitions, and normal Mandy, I would say, for you to receive a voice note from me on a morning walk as I tap into the link between my own well-being and performance. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Tim, and thanks for having me. And I look forward to those notes. Actually, they're really enjoyable. It's nice to see them pop up.
They're a nice, non-intrusive way, I think, of communicating with people, especially at that time of the morning when I'm up. So. And the kind of morning walk being quite, I think I've shared with you before, core to my own well-being and one of those kind of sort of daily practices.
Yeah, and we have a lot of clarity when we're out and about, don't we? We tend to think a bit clearer. It's usually a good time.
100%. And that thing about getting up in the morning, doing something physical, being out in nature, you're taking 3 or 4 things there off the bat, aren't you, kind of straight away? And so some of the clarity that you get in your thinking, and you're I think ultimately that it's your it's an uninterrupted space for you as well, enables for that thinking to happen. And then it's like, morning Mandy, Tim here, and the voice starts, and you see the ping come up at like 7:45 on your phone. So there's a really lovely story in terms of the connection between your coaching journey and well-being, and how those two kind of come together, which I thought would be really interesting to hear.
So I've had a long history of working in healthcare and working in the NHS and working in occupational health. I specialised in occupational health after a short stint in neurosurgery and neurology. And interestingly, at the time, and really timely for today, actually, in talking about coaching and well-being, coaching was a pilot, a coaching training program. It was a pilot program for the NHS trust I was working at the time, and they encompassed it under the wellbeing umbrella. So there was a lot of initiatives going on around a wellbeing strategy for the organisation. And being the lead in the occupational health service at the time, I couldn't say no that I wouldn't take part in the coach training program. I didn't really know much about it. I'd read a few books, and I'd kind of had various short training around leadership style and things that you can bring in. So this was a really interesting concept, and I loved it. I fell in love with the whole approach around coaching, but also more about how I could frame myself in terms of the conversations that I needed to have with the team I had then. And that then, when I resigned from the NHS full-time job in 2016 and wanted to kind of look at setting up my own kind of coaching practice around this space. And the training I had there led me into coaching, looking at coaching and resilience and kind of the relationship around that, and what healthcare professionals could learn from coaching and bring into their practice. And I got involved in what they called a preceptorship program, which was a program for newly qualified nurses to look at their career trajectory, I suppose, and what they would like to do next after they've had their training. And what I was really struck by was how many people came through that program saying to me that I have aspirations to be a specialist in a certain part of medicine, to be a director of nursing. I want to be a chief nurse in a hospital. But I don't want to go there if by looking at my managers, when I look at my managers, it means I'm going to be tired, angry all the time, really grey looking. I don't look healthy. So they had this fear of burnout even before they started their career journey, if you like. And I was completely taken aback by it, and that kind of how that would stop people from actually having the career they want. So I kind of started off in my kind of coaching journey, my own coaching journey, was trying to support people to have the career that they want without a fear of burnout. So that was where I kind of wanted to kind of push myself. And then that evolved into more career and career transitions and supporting people to manage the challenges around that.
Right. Okay. It's been right at the very heart of it. So
Yeah.
yeah. And as you say that, well-being has always been I guess a benefit, a byproduct of receiving coaching. You're in a space, you're working with a dedicated partner.
Yeah.
But that would have been quite new, I'd imagine, for it to be specifically focused on burnout, on a kind of well-being outcome, as well as then being aligned to a more common use case for coaching, which is a career transition, right?
Yeah. It was at a time when the subject of resilience was really high. And it was a real buzzword. And I think it got overused in terms of the myth of it, what was resilience. But not many people at that time. So this is kind of going back to kind of 2015, 2016. Not many people were talking about the burnout aspects. We were talking about it in the healthcare spaces. In occupational health, we were talking about it with employers, but in a more kind of coaching approach, the burnout was as a byproduct of stress and how we manage ourselves. So it never became a topic just solely on its own. There was a lot happening around coaching and resilience. Carol Pemberton was kind of a leader in those conversations at the time. And I was massively influenced by the models that she had and the work that she did, because it gave some strategy and tools that you could then produce to people to look at and say, if I want to not go there into that burnout phase, what are the things I need to, I call it digging into. So what do I need to, you kind of dip into the tool bag, don't you? And what do I need to access in order to support myself so that I could have this career?
Yeah. As you paint that kind of timeline, I remember being in financial services, and stress was the word that was used a lot.
Yeah.
And stress evolved into burnout. So you used to then hear stress became a bit of an ugly word. We didn't talk about stress because as soon as somebody said stress, then it was like they had to go down a certain path, a certain HR path. So then it was more about this kind of sense of burnout. And then it kind of evolved into well-being, this word well-being now that we speak about, which probably fair to suggest, was heightened during the kind of pandemic as well, and probably partners up a little bit with mental health. I would say about the same time, mental health and well-being were the two things that were sort of being joined together. So it's then the real big focus on well-being and well-being in the workplace. And of course, lots of research that's been done now in terms of the relationship to our well-being, our health, and our performance. But thinking about that kind of journey, think about where we are now, where we talk about it so readily. I mean, it's such a big subject, and press coverage and everything else. What does that what does well-being in the workplace kind of mean to you?
Oh, it's really interesting because it's very vague. And it can be very vague, or you can really kind of make it very specific in terms of what you want to achieve. I think if the World Health Organization has got a really nice definition of well-being as a word itself, because I think it's really important to kind of come back to basics and look at, well, what do we mean by well-being? And you find you have to talk to employers a lot about that, because they all go, oh, I'd like to have a well-being strategy and a well-being program, without even looking at what the purpose of it and what they're trying to achieve. And World Health Organization, so WHO, define it as a positive state experienced by individuals and society. So it's kind of how we feel do we feel good and are we functioning well, is encompassed with that. But they also have another line that follows after that, which says it's the ability of people and society to contribute to a world with a sense of meaning and purpose. And that's the bit that I really like to bring in to coaching, which any coaches listening to us today and our conversation will really key in with that, because that's a lot of what we do in coaching, isn't it? Help people to kind of connect with what their meaning and purpose is in life. And when we look at how we individually are feeling good and how we individually are functioning well, whether it's our health, whether it's who we have relationships with, the people we work with, the environments that we work in. So when you start talking to employers about supporting the well-being of individuals, you start looking at the bigger picture. Where are your people working? What the environment is like? What are the relationships like at work? How are they having conversations with their manager or the people around them? Bullying, harassment, and those kind of issues, and making sure that there's a safe and secure place for people to work in. Is the environment safe? Is it healthy? Looking at the risks posed by tasks. And I think what employers don't do as often, we don't want to paint a massive brush stroke around this, but what employers don't do as often is say, what is the hardest thing I'm asking my employees to do? What is the toughest thing? And what is it that I can do to support them to do that? Or reward them.
Yeah.
So often you hear of people, probably more in the corporate sector, you hear people talk about they really succeeded in achieving targets. They worked their asses off, they really, but then what happens is the targets are harder next year. And there's no reward in that, and there's no incentive in that. And what happens is it gets burnt out. A really interesting and I think I would like to say famous. It's talked about in the corporate world. One of the big four accounting firms in the UK is well known for achieving massive targets in 2021. 2022 and 2023, all of that team are gone now.
Right, okay.
They've left through burnout. So there was no recognition. There was kind of like, wow, this is amazing. They beat all the targets, all the timescales that everybody thought that they could achieve, even themselves, I suppose. But it's only achieved through long hours and really pulling as much as you can from that staff. And that can't continue. It can happen for a short, finite amount of time, but to expect that to happen again and to say, okay, well, next year we now need to do that and more, I think is a bit unrealistic. So we have to look at what is it that's the toughest thing that we ask employees to do, and what is it we need to do to support them to do that well and maintain their health within that.
Yeah, that badge of honor, whether it be around presenteeism, I'm always in the office, I'm always here, or whether it be, oh, I've worked a 14-hour day today, like that is leaving us in society completely. It's actually quite the opposite now, isn't it? Where people that are coming into new employers or looking for roles, they really spend place, should I say, a lot of emphasis on that kind of thing, the culture, the environment, and will I be looked after here? Or is this going to be a case of I'm going to be expected to work kind of 15-hour days? And it's being shunned in many ways, I would say, that kind of expectation. I wouldn't say it's gone completely, it's still there. But in terms of the trend, would I be right in saying that, people are keeping a very close eye out for that, and maybe also as a product of the pandemic, where we start to pay a hell of a lot of attention to our work-life balance, our health, our and with that in mind, and what we might have experienced in that time, really want to make sure that is present in our work and in our day-to-day lives. So are you kind of seeing that as well, in terms of that kind of shunning of the badge of honor of 15-hour days, and we're really doing it, guys, and that style of culture?
I think it's really interesting, because if you look at it in two facets, I think the pandemic is we don't want to keep on talking about it, but it was a really stark reminder of the importance of health at work. and the importance of being healthy and being able to contribute to that work of what your employer does, and also what you do in terms of your own kind of contribution, your own purpose within that. So there's something around the employers kind of recognizing that, but also employees recognizing, well, what is it that's causing me to work 14 hours a day, or am I not able to say no? Am I someone who, you get people who always want to help problem solve. So then they get involved in so many other things. I have a series of, you can see them there, little monkeys. So in our coaching sessions, we talk about these little monkeys as other people's problems that then land on your desk, and you invited them in, and they're all kind of things that possibly don't belong to you anymore, but you are the one who's there until 7, 8 o'clock at night, or on, whether it's remotely at home or in the office, while the colleague who owned that monkey has actually gone home. And so there's something about being very mindful on the two sides of the scale of where the line needs to be drawn in order to preserve your energy and to kind of maintain kind of that productivity. There's an interesting shift at the moment when I talk to managers at the middle level. They have a very interesting time, but also quite challenging. And I often talk about the kind of conversations that need to be had with employees. So if you look at an example around having a Zoom meeting with your team, so a lot of stuff has moved online now, and there'll be certain team members who refuse to have their video on. And then that sometimes has an impact on the manager and the person chairing the meeting, so it doesn't matter who it is, in terms of how they engage with their team and with the people who are there. They don't have the conversation about how not seeing them has impacted their delivery or what they wanted to achieve out of the meeting. The person who asked for the video to be, asked or told them, sometimes they'll say, I can't have my video on. They don't talk about, well, what was the reason for that? And you don't need to go into the detail. You just need to talk about what impact it has, having a video on, what impact that has on me and my contribution to the meeting, which is very important, because I'm very keen that we're not witnesses when we go to team meetings. We should be participating and contributing and really thinking about what your role is in those. So there's something around managers being able to have that conversation. But what gets thrown back to me is that they find that conversation really, really challenging because of diversity and inclusion policies and procedures and processes, that ethnicity can be thrown back at them. You're only saying that to me because, all sorts of other reasons, which an individual might use as a bit of a cover up for a vulnerability that they might have, but they're not willing to talk to a manager about it and are not willing to share that. So I think there's something around, some managers feel like they walk on eggshells and not able to fully have that conversation. A client the other week said, Mandy, I'm a middle-aged white male. I can't have these conversations with staff members who's in a minority ethnic group because of fear, not necessarily of fact of something that's been thrown back, but sometimes it's just a fear alone of what might be the consequences of bringing up that conversation. That's the bit that I think really needs looking at properly and kind of supporting everybody to be able to have open, honest conversations and to feel challenged, but to feel safe when there's challenge in that space. And I think without that I think we're always going to be kind of walking around and maneuvering around these kind of little obstacles and blocks, not actually getting to the goals that we want to achieve. So I feel that's a really important piece.
I can really see that with the word safety that you kind of mentioned there, in terms of how fundamental that is in terms of well-being in the workplace. If I don't feel safe, whether I'm a manager or I'm an individual that doesn't want to put their camera on, I'm a manager that doesn't want to engage in that conversation. Maybe because I don't feel I have the skills to have that conversation as well, and to address that conversation in the right way. And how very quickly stories can emerge from the thoughts that we tell ourselves. That person doesn't have their camera on because of this. This person's asking me to turn my camera on because of that. And without the safety and the trust to have that conversation, disconnects happen. Whereas, as you mentioned, when you're frontline, when you're a manager and you're looking after teams, it's all about connection. So it's all about connection, and to be able to support, achieve performance, be the representative of the company that in a remote world can be the only contact, I guess, on a day-to-day basis with the company. So representation of their culture. So, it's absolutely fundamental, isn't it? The safety side of things. There was part of me that had a question about trying to really understand people's needs. When you're talking about potentially someone who doesn't want to have their camera on, how important it is for a line manager to understand the needs of an individual, be able to support them, specifically when we're talking about well-being. But someone is very unlikely to share their needs, as it were, openly, without the safety of knowing that they're going to be held correctly, by that kind of individual. Just three things that or maybe there's a couple more, there's a lot more actually, but there's a few things there that you mentioned about well-being that in the workplace. One was, what was really striking to me was around this word well-being and the meaning of that, how I identify with what that means to me. So, my purpose, my values, my career direction. What does that look like to me? How an organization within its culture, there's incentivization of well-being as well, that sort of forms part of it. But also behaviorally, that as an individual, a company could be doing all these things, but behaviorally, I could be susceptible, I guess, in terms of, like you say, with the monkeys, and so what does that individual own in terms of being able to manage their own behavior? Everything could be put in place there, but if an individual has those behaviors, that is going to lead them, if they're not addressed, to burnout, then there's responsibility there too. And really beautifully underpinned there about how safety and trust is so important to all of those conversations and the complexities that come with them. To do that.
The very first step of Patrick Lencioni's model of the 5 dysfunctions of teams, and trust, and building trust, getting to know you, getting to know me. I talk to employers particularly about know your engine. So you couldn't, if you have a washing machine at home and you do a load of washing, 2 loads a day, what have you, kind of what output you can get. If you try and do 10 a day, obviously that's going to pack in sooner than later, isn't it? So just know your engine, know what helps your employees to thrive, but also then where they might need to resource themselves. And we put in all these initiatives of yoga classes, mindfulness, gyms, all this kind of stuff, which is all good stuff, and actually is probably expected as a basic now with most employers. But if your gym is not being, on-site gym is not being used enough, then potentially there's some money there that you could put into giving somebody an extra day off, or putting it into training and development. One thing, coming from public sector, budgets get very, very tight. And when you are stripping budgets, you do look at the training budget. And that tends to be one of the first areas where things get cut. Yet that's how we grow, and that's how we prosper. And it's the place where employees feel they're getting something back off the employer, and it becomes a real incentive and a real benefit. But if we cut it off and then say, but you can have access to the gym, well, actually, not everybody wants that, but they may really value some of the training courses. So there's something around know your engine for employers, but also for employees as well. And the individual is know your own engine too.
Yeah.
So what is it? We can go from very stressed to burnout very, very quickly. So you can kind of be in this stress continuum for months and just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, and then you fall off like off a cliff. So there's something about knowing what it is that you do when you're stressed. What is it you're not doing when you're stressed that normally helps you refuel and recharge? There's something around, I don't know if you've experienced this, Tim, but when we get overwhelmed and overloaded, we retract and we draw ourselves back. And it's the body's natural way to conserve energy. So we cancel engagements with friends, we stop, with certain pieces of work that we don't do. We might not clean the house. There's lots of little things that we kind of stop doing because the body wants to conserve the energy. It's exhausted.
I call that limp mode. You go into limp mode like a car does,
Yeah.
It's almost that preservation, it's trying to survive to get you to the next mile. It feels like
This is it. Yeah. I got up, I had my breakfast, I'm standing, But what we tend to do is we tend to cut out everything, including the things that bring us joy and including the things that resource us. So hobbies. So we stop doing something. So there's something about knowing where you're not getting your joy and energy from, knowing where you do get it from, sorry, and then trying to ensure that some of that still exists, even with all of this other stuff that's going on, whether it's a walk, whether it's a exercise. I'm a big fan of Jackie Holder is a very well-known coach who specializes in journaling.
Right.
And she recommends the green prescription. And she does, you probably know Jackie, and I love her green prescription. And I think it's a really important one to just have that included with when you're kind of really feeling under pressure, that is your non-negotiable. I think I might be speaking to someone who embraces that idea, but there's just something about being out in nature and just being present with it. So actually just going out and saying, even if it's 15 minutes, look at around you. What do you feel? I talk about using all the senses. What do you smell? What do you see? What do you hear? I got sick like most of the country with COVID, and it was probably the worst flu-like symptoms I ever had, and lack of energy and what have you. And it was the first time I noticed birds in my garden. So I was sitting outside and couldn't do anything. I was just like literally lying there going, okay, I have no energy to do stuff. And there was a bird that kind of sat on a branch and I had no idea what it was. And I was like, gee, I know absolutely nothing about birds. And so I was talking to my brother about it, and he introduced me to an app that is an identification app of bird sounds and bird pictures, which I love. So now I will try and cue in to what I can hear around me and then try and recognize what they are, because it takes me away from everything else that's going on, allows me to be present, finding little things, because it's quite easy to get your thoughts to wander off, even when you're walking. Well, I've got two dogs, so even when I'm walking the dogs. So there's just something about what is it that can help me keep me engaged in the present. And having that app works for me, and making sure I'm kind of cueing into what's around me. So bringing in those energy points, stuff that gives you joy, don't lose that when you are feeling really stressed and really up against it.
Yeah. 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 So what's lovely about that is that when you came up to Scotland last year, you shared that app with me.
I did, yeah.
And I think actually when like, it'd be really interesting to know what bird that is. And you went, oh, I've got an app for that. It's like really, really sort of cliche. And now I use that too.
Yeah.
And there's something about just coming back to that kind of knowing. So you mentioned before about how you know what well-being looks like for you, how you identify with that, then knowing the sort of sense of self-knowledge, really, of what are the things that are in my that fill my cup, like you say. So when you go into limp mode, everything gets, it's limp mode, and then but it's actually then knowing, okay, well, what I know is that if I go for a walk for an hour, my cortisol levels drop, I naturally relax, my creative thinking's and increases, and I feel I feel a lot better from being in nature, and that's I can now rely on that as a support for me, and yeah, it's like a back to your toolkit analogy. You then know what you can fall back on when you notice yourself in that moment. It's like, I can fall back on this. When I do these three things, that fills my cup.
That's
and,
it. Yeah.
That keeps me, kind of keeps me going and not having to sit in that kind of limp mode. And you're going to see where I'm going with this now, because I'm thinking about this kind of self-knowledge. I'm going back into coaching and thinking about this connection between coaching and well-being. So when we're doing work, when someone's working with a coach, focusing on their well-being, that's the kind of work that they're doing. Is that right? It's the identifying with what does well-being mean to me? That kind of what fills my cup. It's building up that sense of self-knowledge. Is that right? And to be able then, and also, I guess, to know and be able to notice when, if you use the word burnout, you might be teetering, or heading down that path.
Yeah, absolutely. I was taught, I don't know where this model came from, and I believe it's been attributed so far back in the line that nobody knows now. But it's one that gets taught in a lot of the formal coaching, coach training, coach skills programs. And it's that triangle where you have awareness. So the role of coaching is raising awareness of someone's self, but also whatever the situation or the thing that they want to improve, their role within that and what that is. So there's a whole piece around raising someone's self-awareness. Then when you come to your triangle, another corner, it's around choice. So once you raise your awareness around it, you then open up the choices about what you can do about the direction that you want to go in. And then the other corner is around responsibility. So what is it that I need to hold myself responsible for those choices that I make, be accountable for them? Is it my responsibility or is it somebody else's? Quite often it's your own. But also knowing that it's your own responsibility means then that you have more power, you kind of feel empowered to make those changes. So I think it's a really important one to kind of, when I'm doing when I'm running the coaching skills programs, is to remind people, when you're coaching, it's those 3 points. That's all you want to achieve within coaching. If you've achieved someone's self-awareness being improved and widened, and there's you're opening up the perspectives, then that's a really good shift in itself, because then the choice and the responsibility kind of flow in with that shortly after.
Yeah, and that sense of empowerment builds confidence,
And
totally. To be able to say, I can confidently manage my well-being, and have ownership, and all the layers that come with that, responsibility, all that kind of stuff. It's quite significant.
Yeah, there is. It's really interesting. I've heard it a couple of times recently. So 2022, the year 2022 was theoretically known as the year of burnout for individuals, because after the pandemic, and the pandemic spanned over 2 years. So if you think of 2020 was like complete lockdown, 2021 was, we were locked down, we were, there were all these different rules and things. The year 2022, we flung ourselves into everything. We wanted to go on holidays. We wanted to catch up on lost time and things that didn't happen. for us then. We wanted to really progress our careers, and we wanted to do things that we didn't finish. Hobbies. We started hobbies in the lockdown, and then we were like, well, I must finish it now. So we were kind of throwing ourselves all in. And last year, I heard it probably about 3 or 4 times in clients where their first chemistry call was, I don't know who I am anymore. And that sense of lost identity, the first time I heard it, I was really like, oh my goodness, that I can't imagine how that must feel for some people who have literally thrown themselves, usually to work. They've thrown themselves right into work. They've lost sense of the other side of what they love to do. They've disengaged with all of their hobbies. They've disengaged with what energizes them. And a lot of coaching is about helping people to connect with their identity again. But nobody comes to coaching saying, can you help me find myself, or can you help me understand myself more? But the other issues and problems that they want to focus on, so whether it's actually I want better work-life balance, or I want to have a better, I want to review my purpose, which some people tend to do after such a major thing. So, that's more about reconnecting with who I am. What are my values? What drives me? What motivates me? What are the things that, connect for me and create the individual that I am? Apologies. And so there's something about how coaching supports people to reconnect with their sense of self.
So I'm sat here, Mandy, this might not be a surprise, but it's certainly a refresher for me. As we're talking about, organizations that when they're looking to support with well-being, we'll be looking at, I think you mentioned like gym memberships or mindfulness apps, and and I can understand that, because these are services that, in a world where inclusion is so important, you can offer to everybody, and so they're done quite, but when you're thinking about well-being and so much related to identity and values and individual needs, how personalized it really needs to be for something like this to have an impact. So you're really getting a return on what it is that the organization are investing in. And I'm trying to think of what would be, if someone were to come to, if someone were to come to their leader and they're to say, I have someone, they're on I'm kind of concerned about their well-being. I think they might be on the verge of burnout. I'm trying to think of a better intervention than coaching in that moment, for all the things that you've said. I mean, that's a bit for the fact of the self-learning, the identity, the accountability, the responsibility. And I appreciate it's very challenging to give coaching to everybody, but if you have to give coaching to everybody for well-being, then you've got a far bigger problem than you might think. So for those kind of individual needs, it's a real sort of reminder for me in terms of the different facets in which it supports that individual come to that point. These are my words, not yours, but like having that empowerment and that sort of self-confidence in their well-being.
There's something about employers not feeling overwhelmed as well by having to support every individual need around that, and individuals feeling empowered to seek advice where they need it and guidance where they need it, whether it's a coach, whether it's a peer mentor, or wherever the gaps are. I think there's a lot of tools out there that we can support individuals to do some work on their own. And to kind of research what it is that you need to help fill your cup. I think there's definitely a really good space for coaching conversations in this. I feel really strongly, which we've kind of talked about before, about coaching skills being taught, I suppose, at a younger age, so that younger individuals will grow with coaching ethos, I kind of want to say, within them. So it encourages the work environment to be a safer space to have the open conversations about what I need to thrive, about what I need for space, about what I need to fulfill my purpose, and where I can do that. And just recognizing, so I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they are under a lot of pressure. They're having to take some time out of work. Work is mad busy. It's full on. It's always going to be like that. So they've taken a bit of time out, but it's not about them wanting to leave that job. They love that job. They love the team that they're with. It's just actually occasionally I need to look at where I recharge. I think we were talking about that already. But also, what is it that's causing me to feel so overwhelmed? And I think part of it for that individual is not saying no. So they take on too much. So there's just something around looking at what it is that's causing some of that dissatisfaction around that. But yeah, coaching, to come back on that point, I think coaching skills trained at a more kind of, whether it's young people or whether we do it when someone is a new manager, and it's absolutely crucial part of their career development, I suppose. It just becomes a natural evolvement, doesn't it, in terms of managerial and leadership skills. Can you imagine our leaders who had coaching skills that then grow with them from the ages of the mid-20s, and then and they're probably leading some of the best organizations. So that's what we want. We want more of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah. When you look at that kind of early career, what you see is a lot of technical skills. What we're seeing is a huge demand for the interpersonal skills. So, the presenting ideas, the communication, those kind of building relationships kind of skills. And I think then that, the next, this, it's like this self-knowledge, this, again, these kind of coaching skills to be able to then go into an employer and absolutely understand what it is that you need, how you do your best work, what gets you into flow, how you flourish, incredibly empowering for the individual, but then also a huge benefit to their employer at the same time. And then you apply that to leadership in terms of taking those skills to then, grow others.
And I think what comes to my mind is this, when we talk about it like this, it's really nice for us to sit here and kind of talk about that ideal. And in practice, it's not as easy as that. Individuals don't often know what's not working. They just feel jarred. They just feel like this is not right. Something's not right. This is not working for me. And often without a coaching support or some place where you can have a conversation to help you open up. It can be a best friend, it could be a partner, it could be just someone you trust where you can kind of go, this is not right. Someone who can ask you questions and challenge you to help you look at it at a deeper level than just this piece here. So I think we're often not very good at naming it for ourselves. We're often not very good at kind of describing it and finding the language, which is what's so wonderful about coaching, because it is that really nice, safe space where you can be vulnerable, you can open up that to say, yeah, this is how I really feel, but I can't tell anybody at work because I'm going to be judged by that. Or I can't tell them at home because I don't want to seem like I'm not coping. Yeah. So there's there's something about where we can create those safe spaces for people to find their narrative and to kind of understand what that is. Do you mind if I tell you a story about emotions and naming emotion? And I say this story because, and I tell clients about it, because it's really important that we find what the narrative is for us and not assuming what we think society would name something. So I have 2 dogs. We moved to the countryside from big city. Massive transition for us to say. There's, for dog walks around here, there are public pathways, but there's 3 fields, and often 3 fields with livestock. And on one occasion, I was with a neighbour with their dog as well. And on one occasion, we walked through a field with horses, the really big working horses. And we got chased by horses. And you hear on TV or on other things that programs and things, stop. If you are chased by livestock, you stop and you stand still. So I could hear my friend saying, stop, stay where you are. She was already at the gate. You know, there's these crossing gates. And I kind of froze and I kind of stood there, and this horse kept coming towards us. It was like huge. So when I tell this story, we eventually kind of got, I got free, if you like. So I was in the middle of the field, so ran to the other side. When I talk to people about the story and the event, I suppose, people reflect on that and say, that must have been terrifying. That must have been so scary. You must have been so fearful. And when they say it to me, I kind of go, I hear the word and I kind of actually, no, I didn't feel that. I didn't feel that sense of fear. I felt a fear of helplessness. Sorry. So a fear of helplessness, because I just didn't know what to do. So I didn't feel any anxiety that you get with fear, but I recognized that actually I just didn't know what to do. I'm a natural problem solver anyway, so it's kind of like, oh, what do you do with this? Anyway, and I know you're supposed to wave your arms around and scare them. But I think it's just really important to kind of emphasize that society have judgments around what an emotion, what you might be feeling, based on what they think they might do in that situation or might be feeling in that situation. But you don't know until you're in it. Yes. Really, which is the same for us. So there's something about being able to name it for you, have the narrative of what is it that you're going through. So lots of people have similar symptoms around burnout, around the exhaustion, the tiredness, the irritability, and not eating properly, whatever way that is. But actually, there's other stuff that goes on that's your own narrative. And I think in coaching, that's where we can really help somebody frame that for themselves. And I can't describe for some clients the freedom that they feel and the empowerment that they feel when that touches their core. For that's me, that's how it feels for me, and that's what coaching is more about. Actually, it's about helping them attach to that, because then the awareness is raised and you've got a little bit more choice about what can I do with that that's going to support me in my situation.
Yeah, and over time, seeing that, so I'm stuck. So what you described, I'm stuck. I've opened up through coaching. Yeah. That's me. And then the next time you feel stuck or you notice yourself feel stuck, you can then name that for you, as opposed to, like you say, other things that might be shared around you, other kind of context that you might hear or kind of come across, whether, we know how influential media is, podcasts are. We sometimes listen into things hoping to find something that sort of explains it, which can often not be true. You've just been able to connect the dots in some way that, puts a name to it. Versus going, no, I know what this is. This is me. And that really puts you in a place to do something about it.
And then have your what we call the kit bag or your backpack of tools and resources. That you can then say, oh, this is what I need today. We have a physical first aid box, plasters, bandages, paracetamol for a headache, whatever it is that's in your first aid box. But we don't often do it for our mental health. And so there's that famous national training program, the mental health first aid, but we don't create our own little kit at home or wherever you need it, and be able to dip into that and what you need. And I think that's what's important for people to think about, what they can create, and not always able to do that on your own initially, but once you've done it and set it up, it sets you up well for the future, for any of those things that crop up. And
there's two things about that for me, actually, as you say that. One is, again, coming back to identifying what's right for you. You know, so
Yeah.
some you mentioned journaling earlier on. Some people might say meditation, might say
Yeah.
walks, might say you're really getting your heart rate up and doing
Yeah.
some CrossFit or something like
Exercise,
that.
yeah.
And so if meditation doesn't work for you, that's fine. It is not the only answer.
Yeah.
There will be something through that exploration that will, you know, be the thing that sort of fills your cup. The second thing for me that is often with these things as well, you can get a sense that you've got to be doing them all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and what you put really nicely there, that yes, it is a toolkit, and then at that time you can you use those to help move you forward, as
Yeah.
opposed to it having to be a daily, lifelong
Mm.
commitment that you need just to be able to maintain a status quo. It's actually
Yeah.
about more about saying and noticing what is it, and that I don't need to be doing this all the time. And I think sometimes with things like productivity and habits and tools, you know, there's this thing that we have to be doing them
Yeah.
every single day. It's a morning routine, whereas
Yeah.
actually being able to not hold on to those too tightly,
Yeah.
you know, let them go and use them more on demand, more kind of as and when.
This is it.
But that is only possible through that noticing and that awareness. Is like knowing what I
Yeah.
need when I need it.
When you need it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's been, because it helps you notice what's been missing.
Yes.
So often you find when people are reviewing their health, and they want to improve their health and well-being, they're thinking, well, I'm going to exercise 3 times a week.
Yeah.
But actually, they're already got a hectic week as it is. So being realistic around what that plan might look like, so that you can be your own cheerleader and help yourself succeed. Do you know? And it's kind of like, actually, well, I can probably do 2 half-hour walks and then one cardiovascular workout if that's what I need once a week.
Yeah.
So there's just something about kind of being able to look back on that and supporting yourself. Don't set yourself up here, and then it's once you've followed, you know, you haven't even achieved that, you then really downbeat on yourself. So do things that support yourself to achieve it, and what you need
Yeah,
for it.
and let go of things, I would say as well. Sometimes we're
Yeah.
very quick to
Yeah.
add things in without saying, well, if I'm going to do this,
Yeah.
what do I need to let go of to make that happen?
Yeah.
Because you've only got a limited amount of capacity, and as well as hours in the day. So
Yeah.
Thanks so much for that, Mandy. I guess I've got a few questions, you know, and a lot, I think, of what we've talked about will be captured in these, but I think it'd be really nice to get, you know, succinct answers to a couple of these specific questions. I think people really benefit from your expertise. So the first one, I'm going to go straight in. I'll fire in, which is work-life balance overrated or even realistic?
I don't think anyone can ever recall a time when things feel an equilibrium, in balance. So I think it's a concept that is almost impossible to reach if we live, you know, a regular life. I prefer to refer to it as work-life harmony. When we look at our home and work life, or personal life with work, or our roles in communities, etc., which we tend to carry as separate identities. So there's something about how we can look at that with a bit more harmony. And I talk about it being a dance. So it's kind of, life is a dance around all of these different things that we get involved in. And sometimes our energy needs to be in one place more than another. So where I see this most talked about is with parent returners when they come to coaching with me. They feel an awful sense of guilt when they've returned to work after a year of maternity leave or paternity leave, and their child starts nursery, and then they pick up all the bugs and viruses that are going, of which then the parent needs to be at home with them and looking after them. And they're usually quite poorly, you know, the wee ones. So the guilt that builds up because they've just come back and now they need to ask their colleagues to continue to support their workload. And likewise, you want to come back to work and you want to really get stuck back in, and you get involved in projects and deadlines, but there's things at home that also need managing. And the key concept I talk around that is having conversations. So what kind of conversation do I need to have with my team, my manager, my co-workers, if I need to be attending to my young family because of various illnesses and stuff that's out of my control? There's this stuff that's not in your control, and negotiate what you can do and what you need help with, and be really clear about that. But likewise, what we don't do is have the conversation at home and have the conversation with your family, your partner about, actually, I really want to throw myself back into this project, and I feel this is a really good thing to get me back into the work that I love. Sometimes that means I need your help with bath times, bedtime stories, picking up from nursery, all those kind of little things. So there's something around how we have those conversations about what we need through challenging periods. Then that does become that dance, and that harmony then starts to build in. Often also, just when we talk about work-life balance, when someone says, I really crave work-life balance, it's usually stemming from a dissatisfaction with something that they have at work. They don't feel connected. That work doesn't define who I am anymore. And sometimes that happens to people when they come back after a period of absence, whether it's long-term sickness absence that sometimes shifts people's perspective, or returning after having children. Your world changes, and we come back with a different lens. And there's something around, I don't feel in balance anymore because I've been dragged into stuff, and it's like walking through treacle, etc. There's something about helping people look at what is it that they're dissatisfied with, and then the conversations that you need to have so that you can do that dance.
Brilliant. And having been in that juggling place where you quickly realize you can't parent very well in that moment, and you can't work if you try and juggle, you can't do either very well.
No.
And a conversation that I would have with myself would be moving from, what should I do just now, like what could I do today, and create very clear lines between, I'm going to spend this time with my son, and then my partner will then take over, and then I will then do that. And so that it doesn't feel that your whole day it can feel that everything's in turmoil, whereas actually that conversation of what could I do, just helps segment it down a little bit. So in terms of here you go, secrets. What's your secret to helping individuals maintain a work-life harmony, as we've just said?
The secrets to having work-life harmony is having that conversation. In the places that you need it. I think it is focusing on, it's a collaboration. And I talk about teamwork. So you have teamwork at home, and you have teamwork at work. So I think the real secret is ensuring you've had that conversation and open up the discussion about what can happen. It gives a reassurance that things can have harmony whilst the pressure is on in different corners.
Fantastic. So if I'm an organization and I am looking to create a work wellness program, so we've just spoken about these, and I want it to be successful, and thinking to your story back at the start around, burnout, what should I consider in the design of that program?
There are a few things. One is, what is the purpose of your wellness program if you're going to establish one? What is it that you want to achieve with that? And being very, very clear around what that purpose is. Not just what we've seen in the past with some organizations, it's a tick box exercise. I've had conversations with large organizations about the resilience program. So in the early days when I was looking at resilience, and they will wax lyrical about all of these things that they do under their brilliant, award-winning resilience program. Sounds great. And the employee comes to coaching and they've never heard anything about them. Don't know anything about them. So where are they sharing those initiatives? Also, you see satisfaction surveys being sent out to employees looking at their happiness at work and their engagement, etc. And the result of that is that they put an extra microwave in the kitchen because somebody moaned about the microwave not being available or having to queue for a microwave. They're not going to have an impact on your well-being purpose, if you like, the purpose of your well-being strategy, if I could say that better. And I think there's something around, there's an initiative in the NHS for patients, actually, where clinicians are to ask a patient, what matters to you? So in terms of your care, when you come into hospital, what is it that matters to you? And quite often patients talk about a level of respect. Okay. And I want to be included in decisions and I want to be listened to. So I think if we ask that question to employees, I think then there's something around asking employees, well, what matters to you in terms of how you can and how we together as a society, I suppose, or as a community, so the workplace as a community, help you to maintain your health and to keep you in good health and functioning well, which goes back to our definition earlier today, the how you can function well in work. So what matters to you, I think, is probably the biggest question and the only question you really need to ask. And then look at, as a group, what are the similarities that come out of that, and then start looking at a strategy around that.
Yeah. So that knowing your engine phase.
Know your engine, phase,
yeah. Yeah. And with with all these things, the communication of people to know that it exists, whether that be wellness program, training, learning. It's not an easy thing to do, of course, but it is making sure that people know about it. That it exists.
Exactly. Good communication.
So if I'm a let's just say I'm a leader just now, my company hasn't yet, they're going through all this, they're asking us the questions, okay, but they've not quite created their program yet, and I feel I am a little bit burnt out. What are 3 tips, Mandy, that you would give me in that moment?
Know your engine. It's know your engine. I think it is understanding yourself and your own behaviors and your own beliefs within the context of what's going on at that time. We often don't feel able to look at that on our own. So I think there's something around, if you're feeling burnt out, have a trusted other that you can talk to, just to explore what's happening for you. So there's something about seeking advice and resources of what you need. There is what I call discover and experiment. So be curious about what you need to build you back up again. We can read, and you'll see everywhere around looking after yourself or avoiding burnout is to write a journal, write a gratitude journal, go on a mindfulness retreat, make sure you do mindfulness every day. There's a whole, make sure you eat healthily. There's all these things. And actually, even if you look at one of those around mindfulness, there's lots of different practices around mindfulness. Don't do one and then go, didn't work for me, and dismiss it. There's something around mindfulness practices about bringing us to the present. That's what the goal is. How can I stop all the worry thoughts up here to help me engage with my present moment and give me the best chance to move forward? So there's something about discover what it is that you might need, but also experiment with that and see what works and see what doesn't work. Around that. And then I talked earlier about the green prescription, the Jackie Holder model, which is about getting outside and just ensuring that you're present with nature and just that little bit of headspace around that. And I've stopped listening to podcasts on some walks, not all the time, but there's occasionally when I've had a really, really busy week and I think actually I just need to have to settle down, and adding more information and podcasts and music and into my head whilst I'm going out for a walk and I need some space is actually counterintuitive. Yeah. So there's something around actually give yourself the opportunity to connect with the space around you and just let go, leave the headphones behind.
Yeah, that's stripping back can be so important, right? Especially mindful of your inputs. You know,
Yeah.
you're watching the news,
Yeah.
podcasts, all these things are going in. They're all forming
Yeah.
part of it. So to be able to, one thing you can control is to take them out, cut them out. So
Yeah. Yeah.
brilliant.
Makes your brain, if I could, I just add, it makes your brain work harder because your
Yes.
brain's trying to naturally, it filters things through and summarizes them in a way so that we can pull up detail when we need it. And what we're doing is we're overloading it with more and I can't cope with it.
Mandy, thank you so much for your time. I feel we could have been here for a lot longer. And I look forward to having another conversation around probably similar subjects because it's certainly not going to go away. You know, health and well-being. Where could people find out more about you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I assume we'll share the links, but I'm on
Yes.
LinkedIn and I have a website which is just a landing kind of website to share more information about my background and what kind of coaching I do. It's about to go through a revamp, so I'm very excited about that because things change in coaching all the time, don't they? And what you get involved in, and yeah, I'm on social media, just Instagram. I tend to kind of be there, but messaging wise, LinkedIn or the website is the key places.
And your yes, your Instagram, as I always say, is very impressive. It's very impressive. I'm very jealous of
It's
the wonderful
yeah,
creations you create there. So I definitely
uh,
recommend
it's
following
a
Mandy on Instagram.
oh, thank you.
Thank you
And
so much for the conversation.
thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it, Tim. It's been good connecting with you.